If you see anyone waiting in the lobby, you can just admit them through. So good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first of our Kelp Forest Alliance webinar series. Thank you for registering to come listen today. We've got two wonderful talks. The first is from Love Rimurimu in kelp restoration in Aeoteora, New Zealand. And then we're going to hear about the mysterious world of bull kelp. So just a little bit to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Aeoteora Nation, the traditional lands from which I'm presenting here in Sydney, Australia, and extend my respects to any Aboriginal or First Nations people in the audience and elders past and present. And a little bit about the Kelp Forest Alliance. We're a not-for-profit, as I said, based here in Sydney, and we're focused on protecting and restoring 4 million hectares of kelp forests all around the world, as well as building this global kelp forest community of anyone who's really interested in kelp, cares about kelp, kelp aficionado, whatever you want. If you like kelp, you're in on our books. So if you're interested in learning more or signing up to our mailing list, if you're not already on it, you can find out on the kelpforestalliance.com/contact and register there. And we'll have a continuous webinar series. So this is, as I said, the first one, and we'll have another one in November looking at golden kelp restoration in Australia. It's really interesting cutting-edge work on genetics and their potential to be the key to thermal tolerance for kelp restoration in warming oceans, as well as some monitoring and reporting standards. So that will be November 19th at 4 p.m. on California, West Coast, North America time, or November 20th, 9 a.m. Sydney, Eastern Australia time. A little bit of housekeeping. This is all going to be recorded and trimmed and then uploaded to YouTube. So anyone who couldn't make it today is able to have a look at the stories that we talk about and the questions and the conversations that we're having. And we'll have those two presentations followed by short questions and answers for each of the speakers, and then a little bit of a group discussion at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Zoe to take us away on our first story.
Kia ora, Aaron, sorry, and tēnā koutou katoa. A kena hia hau ki tēnei whenua ki tēnei moana me ona uri. Ko Zoe Studd, tōku ingoa, hei kai whakahaere hau I te Mount to see I te upoko I whānau. So, good morning, good afternoon and evening, everybody. My name is Studd, I'm the director and co-founder of Mount to see Wellington, and the project lead of Love Rimurimu here in Te Whanganui-a-Tara in Wellington, New Zealand. So I'm just going to hand over to Maya, who's a part of our team.
Ai, kia ora koutou, kia ora Zoe. Ko Maia te oho hauman wharehoka tōku ingoa, hiuri ahau no te Aotearoa taranaki me te aroa hoki. My name's Maya. I work on the Love Rimurimu project. Came onto the project on behalf of mana whenua here, the local iwi, local tribe here in Wellington, and have been working with Love Rimurimu for the last year now, and we'll be sharing some of the cool stuff that we do soon. Kia ora.
Kia ora. All right, I'll just bring up and share here. Good to pie. All right, I can't see anybody, so I'm going to assume yes. We're just going to start with karakia. This karakia was gifted to the project by Taranaki Wānui. And it's really about uplifting the Māori or the life force of kelp forests in this region. No hea te au ka piki, no hea te Māori ka rere, whānaki aki ai ki te rangi, pāti iho ai ki te whenua. Kia rere mai nei ki te moana o rau kawa kawa, kia tau hi, kia tau ha, kia tau ai te Māori o Te Whanganui-a-Tara. E ki tangaroa, e ki pānuku, hui e, tai ki e. So I thought I would begin today just by acknowledging all of you as part of our wider restoration whānau or family. Love Rimurimu began back in 2020, and I'm sure you all know what this is. But these are obviously the sora, or the spores being released from the seaweed species that we are restoring here in Wellington. And we certainly began at a very small scale when we initiated the project, and since then we have grown in every direction and really expanded our work and the collaboration. So what I'm sharing with you today stands on the foundation of some really amazing collaborations with lots of incredible people, community, regional councils, research institutions, mana whenua, and the schools that we work with in the Wellington region as well. So for those of you who are not sure where we are, we're down here at the bottom of the North Island of New Zealand, though some will say the top, and Maya will talk to that in a minute. And we're specifically working in our harbour, in Wellington Harbour, or Te Whanganui-a-Tara, the Great Harbour of Tara. And most of our work is currently around the Motukairangi, or the Miramar Peninsula, which is this peninsula jutting out on the right-hand side, which actually used to be separated from the mainland of Wellington Harbour, but through an earthquake it was uplifted, so it's now connected. But that's where most of our restoration is taking place and scaling up at the moment. So this is the species that we're working with. When we began Love Rimurimu, we certainly weren't fixated on a particular species, and I imagine, you know, more seaweeds will come into the project over time. But the main drivers for seaweed loss in New Zealand, and obviously globally for us, it really is sedimentation, grazer pressure, and climate change. And Rimurimu kakuroa, or giant kelp, macrocystis, it's at its thermal limit, its thermal tolerance in Wellington Harbour and Te Whanganui-a-Tara, so the head of the fish of Wellington. So we've started here, which wasn't necessarily the easiest place to start, but it was a species that that anecdotally we knew was in decline in the harbour and needed our attention. And so the project works across 4 areas. We work to build a community. We've got an education program and lots of training opportunities, building knowledge, and also holding all knowledge with equal weight. So knowledge held in our communities, with our Indigenous community, and through our research institutions, working closely with mana whenua, mana moana, taranaki wānui, and advocating for you know, whole catchment solutions, because the cumulative impacts on our harbour restoration isn't going to address restoring our seaweed forest without, you know, a larger scale plan. And so in 2020, we initiated the Love Rimurimu project with schools and communities. And in this first year, we worked with 4 schools, 2 who were sort of, you know, mainstream English schools, but 2 that are kura kaupapa Māori in the Wellington region, which essentially means it's full immersion Māori language and culture. And because of that partnership and because of that work, we partner with an organisation called Te Aeoteora, and through that we were able to develop a whole lot of new resources and collaborations, because previously we've sort of been working in an environment where there just wasn't a lot out there to kind of educate or teach about seaweeds. So that was a huge amount of fun. We've done all sorts of things through a year-long project with those students, and that program continues on to this day. And these students, and particularly from one kura that are situated on Te Motukairangi on that peninsula, the kura kaupapa Māori o ngā mokopuna. So these students here have worked with us in one way or another for the last 7 years, but for the last 4.5, they've been engaged in Love Rimurimu. And it was through working with them in this project that we started looking at all the impacts and the pressures on the harbour, and they developed a proposal for a restoration project inside Wellington Harbour. And we started advocating for that with funders and with regional council and with Taranaki Wānui. So these guys really are the superstars of this project. and they're the most amazing ambassadors and advocates for that work, and they're really central to the program as it continues to grow as well. We also do lots of work with community groups. So here we are out with our community snorkels, running and hosting a whole range of different community events and ways that people can get engaged with artists. We've drunk cocktails. We've done, all sorts of different bits and pieces. It's really cool how interested the wider community is and how that interest has grown over time. And then other opportunities for them to get involved in the restoration as well. So when we began the project in 2020, there's a lot that we didn't know, but also there's a lot we didn't know about restoration, full stop, but there was also a lot we didn't know about the current state of the harbour or the decline in the harbour. So because we had a lot of community interest, we developed up a program called Kelpers. And we also have a program that's done with Ngā Mokopuna, which is called the Kura Kelpers. And that's like monitoring and helping us to get a picture of what our seaweed assemblages are actually currently like inside the harbour, because we were really just operating in a bit of a vacuum of knowledge. There were little bits and pieces, but nothing connected up to help us understand how much we'd actually lost, to give us an idea of how much we might look to sort of restore or regenerate. And the Kelper training has been quite developed over the past year. Rachel Parry, who's now left our team, but has been developing up some resources and a couple of papers around this, which is looking at how you can engage community. And because we were already doing marine education, we were able to use our own sort of health and safety processes and look at advanced snorkeling and breath hold techniques for being able to do monitoring up to about 7-10 meters around the coastlines. So what I thought I would do is just share with you a video that was made about the project, and I think sums up lots of the different parts of it, and then hand over to Maya.
Now, if you want to grow a forest, then a good place to start is with seedlings. But growing an underwater forest is a bit more complicated.
That's exactly what the Kura Kelpers are doing in Wellington Harbour. Lucas de Jong went to meet them.
Gearing up to explore the underwater forests of Wellington.
They're extremely ecologically important. They're probably the most important group of species in the marine environment.
Seaweed or Rimurimu.
Here in Wellington, we have just incredible seaweed biodiversity. As you dive into seaweed more and more, you just start to appreciate how beautiful it is.
Towering homes to all sorts of sea life. But these colossal undersea trees are struggling.
And it's kind of looking a bit eroded, and it breaks away really easily. And they're just not looking as good as they used to.
It's really a story of degradation.
The major two problems are sedimentation, so from the different river sources, it smothers the seaweed. Second problem is overgrazing by kinna.
They're called kinna barrens, wastelands stripped by the hungry urchins.
So if we take out big snapper, crayfish, blue cod from the ecosystem, we remove all the predators of the kinna numbers go up, and the seaweed numbers go down.
And that's where Love Rimurimu comes in. It's an educational program that works across communities with a simple goal: get people sentimental about seaweed.
It's quite slimy stuff, right? So we weren't entirely sure that the kids would be into it, but they really were.
The ocean's my second home, so I see it as kind of like a grass area or something, as a playground. Honestly, it's just quite beautiful to see it grow.
They're the Kura Kelpers, a young team that, with Love Rimurimu, was researching the declining seaweed on their coastline.
And that grew from them going, well, why aren't we doing restoration? We do restoration on the land, why can't we grow some seaweed in our harbour? If it's in decline, why can't we do it in the harbour? And we rather foolishly said, yeah, that sounds like a piece of cake. Let's do that.
And so the education program grew into a restoration one. The big question was, how do you reforest seaweed?
But we knew we didn't know a lot. And that knowledge was sitting in institutions like Victoria and NIWA, but it wasn't out in the wider community.
So they called Neil and he whipped up some sexy seaweed tanks.
It's a prenatal maybe actually, the right-hand tank, and then you can go to the nursery.
At NIWA, he's seeding future seaweed forests. Using an old car engine, a few crates and some buckets, invisible spores are being nurtured into seaweed seedlings.
It's a fairly crude way of doing it, but it's effective. So that's your settling tank, using a little bit of turbulence to help encourage them to settle. And then once they've grown to maybe 5 millimetres in size, so they get moved over to the left-hand tanks, which are the on-grain tanks. You've got to keep the water cool, you've got to keep it with the right nutrient levels, you've got to keep it moving, pumping.
And when they're big enough, the kura kelpers lovingly find them a home in Wellington Harbour.
The kids took the kono over to the sites that we wanted to plant them, and then they dive down and just like very gently, they're just moving these and then putting them in a nice little spot.
We've never been a part of anything this amazing as students too. Like I thought scientists were like the ones that would probably do this, but no, it's kura kids.
It's their environment. This is where they spend their time. This is what they connect with.
The first plant out was in September, and just like Wellington on a bad day, it's been challenging.
We've lost about 70% of our seaweeds because it turns out baby seaweeds are really tasty.
Got a little canal.
But those that avoided early grazing have quickly made themselves at home.
The seaweeds that have survived are thriving. You know, they're growing well, and seaweeds grow quite fast. This year we will ramp up our effort, so the amount going out and the breadth of time that they'll be planting out as well, because that's part of the learning, you know.
Our goal is to teach our younger students the ways of how to take care of Rimurimu, how to grow them.
One day, Zoe hopes every stage of this growth could be done in the community.
We are looking to develop a community aquaculture facility, which would mean that the students would be learning about being the aquaculturists in the future for those plant outs, growing the seaweeds.
Growing, planting and nurturing that slimy, sticky substance that's the anchor of our coastal life.
So we want people to feel that same, you know, ownership and care and connection to our seaweed forests as they do to our land-based forests.
Growing love for seaweed.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to be talking a little bit to the Te Ao Māori perspective, the Māori worldview, and how that's been incorporated into this project. So yeah, a big part of this project and the parent body of Love Rimurimu Mountains to Sea is connecting our terrestrial forests to our kelp forests, big part of the education and the community events, and just also bringing more people's awareness to that underwater forest because it is lacking in comparison to the terrestrial. And also the connection between the two. Within Te Ao Māori, you see there on the screen, there's two words. There's Rimurimu, which is the name of one of our native trees. Next slide, Zoe. Next slide. Yep, there we go. So this is one of our native trees, Rimurimu, and this is what the fronds look like. And then our seaweed, Rimurimu, looks pretty much exactly the same, bringing those two spaces together. And it also kind of shows how mātauranga Māori and Māori knowledge systems have worked and how we name things. It's always kind of common sense based, and it's always an accessible kind of way for people to kind of learn about two separate things that relate. Next slide. There we go. So this is our seaweed guide that's available on our website. Okay. Oh, you're on mute, Zoe. There we go. Okay. So this is our seaweed guide, and shows all the different some of the seaweeds that we have here in Te Whanganui-a-Tara in Wellington, New Zealand, and we have the scientific names, common names, and also the te reo Māori names. So some of these Māori names are old names, some of them are new names and have been created through this project. A lot of them being quite descriptive names. In Te Ao Māori, a lot of the way we name things is very descriptive, again, to kind of make that accessibility for people to learn about things and share knowledge systems. Next slide. There we go. Yeah, and I wanted to talk about some of how we view things. Oh, that's okay. Oh, the controls. That's okay. Yeah.
Maya, I was going to say, I've got a lag in the slide, so it's showing another screen. So just let me know if you want me to go back or forward, but what I'm seeing on the screen isn't what you're seeing.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's all right. That's all right. We'll work with it. We'll just go from here. So this is similar to the maps that Zoe showed earlier, except for the one on the left, I wanted to kind of show the map of our beautiful country. You'll notice that it looks upside down, and that's what Zoe was meaning in terms of why we call Wellington Te Upoko or Te Ika. So Upoko means head, and Ika means fish. And in our Te Ao Māori space, this is how we viewed our country, basically. So our North Island was the fish that Maui fished up, and the South Island is Te Waka a Maui. So that was Maui's waka, his canoe that he used when he fished the North Island up. So Wellington, we sit at the head of the fish. Yeah. And then when we go into our more specific rohe, our area of Wellington itself, we've kind of pulled out some of these names just to speak to our place names. They hold a lot of knowledge, and they help a lot of conservation work, because it often will, a lot of our place names often describe what has traditionally, historically always been there, has been widely populated there. So we have Te Rumurapa on the bottom there. So Rumurapa is the Māori name for bull kelp, for Davilia. And when you go there today, there is a lot there, and there always has been a lot there. So that's why it was named that. Ruku toa. Ruku means to dive, and toa means strength, or to have strength in something. So it was actually traditionally known as a spot that was mainly used by divers that had lots of skill. Because like Zoe mentioned, Motu Kairangi was an island, and there was a channel going through that little bit of land in the middle there. There was a water channel going through there. So there was a lot of currents there pre-earthquake. Yeah, next slide.
Would you like me to go back to the previous one?
Sure. Speak to that briefly.
Has it gone back though?
Not yet. Oh yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, within Te Ao Māori we have our Māori gods, and we have our two main parent gods, Rangi Nui, the Sky Father, and Papa Tuanuku, the Earth Mother, and then all of their children, which then represent all of our different landscapes. So here I've put Hinemoana and Tangaroa, just because of their specific connection to this project, to Love Rimurimu. Hinemoana is the female god of the sea, and she is the one that is the mother of Rimurimu, of seaweed, and is the one that created Te Whare Rimurimu. So everything we have on Earth connects through whakapapa, through genealogy, back to different gods. And then also when we practice our protocols and our tikanga, we do our karakia. Within this project, we do karakia specifically to these gods. Sometimes other ones as well, like Tāwhiri Mātia, our god of weather, because he has a tumultuous relationship with Tangaroa, the god of the sea, and is known to create storms and such. So we make sure that we do the right thing, follow the correct protocols when carrying out our work in their environments. Next slide, we'll skip 2. Yeah, there we go, perfect. So Taranaki Whanui, we are the iwi, group of tribes down here that hold the territorial rights within Te Whanganui-a-Tara. And myself and my tuakana, my mentor Lee, who's not here, she was also part of this project, Love Rimurimu, over the last year, and we know that the harbour is quite sick, and like they said in the 7 Sharp in that video before, there's lots of issues. There's lots of issues with sedimentation. There's lots of issues with our kina. So myself and Lee, as well as working on Love Rimurimu, also work on different research projects with NIWA. We're working, looking at our kina issues, which is quite a political one here in New Zealand and can have quite varying views. But we do not like to see our kina treated like or called pests. They're still a taonga, they're still a treasure to us. And actually humans are the issue, so we need to sort ourselves out first before we go and blame the urchins. But we also look at anchor damage in our harbour, and we also work in the freshwater space because our rivers are also sick, and we know that they flow directly into the harbour. And all of this that we learn, we hope that it all comes back and helps our seaweed as well, because there are many facets to this larger issue of a really unbalanced ecosystem. Next slide. And then just quickly touch on some of the research that I have been leading on behalf of mana whenua, and that's looking into natural fibres. Next slide. So our natural fibres, our materials that we've used traditionally, historically, for all facets of life as Māori. We use them for shelter, we use them to make sails, we use them to make ropes, make clothes, we use them to eat. So we wanted to see how we could use natural fibres as a substrate to grow rimurimu, to grow macrocystis. So you'll see there's some flax. So I've trialed some flax. The white stuff is the fibre found within the flax. And that's been working really well. And all of this has been done by seeking out the right mentors, making sure I follow the right protocols and respect the plants in the same way that I respect the ocean. But yeah, just wanted to touch on that and show some photos, and hopefully we'll be presenting about this a bit more at the ISS next year, fingers crossed. Next slide. There we go. And then, yeah, these are some of the kids and one of the teachers from Ngā Mokopuna, the kura, the school that Zoe mentioned earlier. So I brought the natural fibres research into the educational side of our project as well, and led some weaving workshops with them, have taught them how to extract the muka, the fibre, out of the flax, which you can see in that last photo. And just kind of bringing them in and being also part of this research as well. So a lot of their stuff was used, the muka was used in some of my trials and my samples. And then if we go to the next slide, we'll see those kono, yeah, in our plant house. Yeah, and I'll hand it back to Zoe.
Kia ora, Maya. I'll just touch really briefly on where we're at now with our aquaculture and our restoration side of the project as well. So as I mentioned, when we first began the project, we did not know how to go about growing a seaweed, and I just really need to acknowledge the expertise and generosity of some amazing phycologists here in Wellington. So Dr. Roberta D'Aquino and Christopher Cornwell. We've also been really supported by Dr. Neil Barr and AboveBelow as well. So here we are going through the process of learning, and a lot of people have, gone through their labs and got really engaged and starting to learn the process as well. The first year or two was really about trying to understand the kinds of substrates that could be useful for our plant outs. We had some really key principles. We wanted to be, obviously, we didn't want to do any more harm by putting any more sort of plastic or other man-made objects back into the moana. So the natural fibres work, and also, looking at other substrates has been really important to us. So this is in the first couple of years, trying to figure out how to get things going. Over time, we've scaled up from a couple of small tanks to this larger aquaculture facility, which is hosted at NIWA and supported by, it's the National Institute of Water and Atmosphere, and supported by the experts there. And these are the kura students coming in to make sure that we've got a good job going. And we have settled on currently using predominantly green gravel, and then hopefully we'll have some trials of the natural fibres also going out this winter. So for us, our first plant outs were in September in 2023. That's Lee Rohina August, who's a part of the project for Taranaki Wānui, and Jorge, our education lead there as well. So that's the day going out on the 23rd of September, which was really momentous for us, and all the kura kelpers were involved in Taranaki Wānui and a lot of our team. So it's a really big celebration. You can see we got a good day for it as well. And over that season, we did about 8 different plant outs, about 380 individual green gravel. Everyone felt pretty hard won that first year. And this is what they look like out in the environment. And you can see that for some of these, we've used a cotton string. But we also, this year, are trialling muka, which is the extracted fibre that Maya was referring to as well. So that we can kind of reduce any other materials going out as well. And so this is our survival rates over time. And I think the great learning for us in this is that, you need to expect and not get too depressed when you lose a lot of seaweeds in that initial kind of plant out period. So looking at, maximising plant out and expecting a high mortality. And we certainly, experienced that. We had really high mortality, and we probably looked too closely in the first year. But we had some good survivorship as well. And we had a whole range of different things. Some of it we don't know what happened, but for example, we had an octopus go through, one site, and obviously it had dinner there, and it knocked all our green gravel over. We tried with different size green gravels as well, so smaller and larger, and our smaller ones dislodged and moved around quite a lot, and we lost a lot that way, and there was definitely grazing too. But this is one of our sites from last year, and those seaweeds there are now over 7-8 metres, which is, a really lovely thing to see. And this year, again, we've just started doing plant outs. In fact, our plant out team was due to go out today, but we've just had a bit of a water quality issue this morning, so that's been delayed. But yeah, the areas that we've got plant outs, we're extending existing forests rather than starting in areas with no macrocystis at the moment. But we're hoping that we can, work in collaboration with perhaps a kind of removal project that then we might be able to then go in and reseed in the areas before other invasive species, get a hold in those spots. So for us, in terms of what's next, we've got all of our plant outs happening winter and now spring, and that's included a scale-up of our hatchery and our nursery. And I think also just to say, you know, in the early years, we really relied on all this technical expertise from research institutes, but now our aquaculture facility is being run by a member of our team who has learnt the aquaculture process, you know, by sort of shadowing our aquaculturists. And that's fabulous because that demonstrates that actually community could quite effectively run, you know, small restoration and aquaculture facilities. And we were really lucky. We were really well supported in this project. So one of the outputs for us is to develop a bit of a toolkit for what we did, the things that worked here well in Aeoteora context, and supporting Taranaki Wānui and advocating for this wider harbour management strategy, which we really desperately need, and keeping our communities and our volunteer really engaged as well. Education and events, they always go on. There's always, you know, wonderful interest from the community around it. And I just wanted to do a little plug because next year in Sea Week 2025, which is March, we're going to hold, we think it's Aotearoa's first seaweed festival, and we would very much welcome anyone's participation or to come and visit us over that period of time as well. So I think just to say a massive thanks to all of our collaborators. You know, we have had incredible support from research institutes, from our council, from our mana whenua partners, from our community, and also really just to acknowledge and thank the Kelp Forest Alliance and you all as the wider whānau working on restoration and seaweed science. Yeah, we've learned an incredible amount and are continuing to do so, but it's really a wonderful thing to be a part of this wider community and collective effort. So kia ora koutou and ka mihi ki a koe. I am going to just finish up by popping on a waiata, a song that was written for the Love Rimurimu project and sung by the couplers of Te Whanganui-a-Tara. Ngā mihi ki a koutou.
Absolutely lovely. Thanks so much, Zoe and Maya. Thank you for sharing that story with us. That was really wonderful. Just keeping everyone's calendar times in mind, we might go straight to Josie without an individual Q&A, and then perhaps we'll have time for a little discussion at the end with everybody. So with thanks to you two, and over to Josie, please.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Zoe and Maya. That was wonderful. That song was really great. I am here in the world of the other bull kelp, the world of Nereocystis leukiana. So what I thought I'd do just in terms of time is take you right to the website that I've created with my partner Marianna Leuschel as AboveBelow, and I'll explain a little bit of who I am as co-director of AboveBelow through going through the website. But I want to say that maybe Erin, you could put it in the chat. Our website is bullkelp.info, so you all can either pull it up on your own screens or follow along here. So does that seem to work for everybody? Erin, does that seem to be working?
Looks lovely.
Okay, great. So I am one of the co-directors of AboveBelow, and Marianna and I are really trying to use the bull kelp to augment ocean literacy. We're really an ocean literacy campaign. where our mission is to celebrate the wonder of bull kelp. And in our case, it is the bull kelp of the eastern edge of the Pacific, here on the western edge of North America. We've done a number of exhibits that use this branding of kelp that has brought the kelp to different communities in Northern California. We had a big exhibit in San Francisco, and another huge kelp fest just this last summer in the on the North Coast. So Maya and Zoe, when you start your Kelp Fest, I think you're going to have a really great response to it, because we had just a wonderful, wonderful response to our 5-week-long Kelp Fest. But I want to stop here and say that this bull kelp website that I'm going to take you through is really us connecting to an incredible network of experts, of phycologists, of agency leads, of naturalists, national parks biologists. Rosa Leuschel was our tribal editor, and it was through connecting with these that we really said we want to build a website that is a kind of an all things bull kelp website or Nereocystis website, where anybody, whether you're in 2nd grade or you're in high school or you're an undergraduate in college trying to figure out how to get connected to the ocean or to some of these restoration efforts, how do you learn the basic deep biology of the bull kelp, and how do we make that appealing? So this is our home page. And I have to say a huge shout out right here to Ellen Litwiller, who is the illustrator that we've worked with on this. And we worked and worked. I really was kind of an artistic director. We can follow our Sorai patch that is slowly wending its way down through the bull kelp forest. Of course, humans have been part of this bull kelp system for millennia. We have the giant kelp, we have rockfish, and this is really showing the richness and biodiversity that comes with these kelp forests, and to show it in this kind of illustrated fashion. So we had the rockfish, and then we get down here and we have the sea urchin, the sunflower sea star, and the abalone. So these are our, I'm going to see if I can make this a little bit bigger. These are kind of some of the main characters in the bull kelp forest. Now you can click on each of these and go to their pages, which are each of these deep pages. But I just want to stop on the footer here and show you kind of the basic architecture of the website. We have the kelp forest community with the whole series of characters, the organisms that are some of the most important ones in this kelp forest community, that each play out in a different way in these regional stories. But we hope we might start with kelp as kin. And this is to really answer the question, why bull kelp? Why Nereocystis? You know, how do we celebrate this organism and really make those people who celebrate the forests above, the redwoods, say here in California, to realize there's just a spectacular forest below the surface of the ocean. So it's surprising, opportunistic, undervalued, underrepresented, really. Here is where I can also kind of introduce some terminology for readers. So in eco-engineer, this is what all kelp forests do, is they create 3-dimensional habitat for all those other organisms, from tiny isopods to whales as big as whales. Bull kelp is a primary producer. It's the base of the food web, the vast ocean food web. So I'm constantly writing these pretty deep stories as a way to build vocabulary, to make them really accessible. Let's go to our kelp forest community here and show this food web. And instead of calling it the trophic cascade or food web, we said, we might not know what the word trophic means, but by the end of this paragraph, you do know what trophic means. And that the trophic cascade is when the displacement of one food level ripples through the ecosystem. And then we get to use these wonderful icons of Ellen's to take us to these pages. So our protagonist of the story is the bull kelp. And we have a big hero page. So we worked with a wonderful Marianna came to this whole project. I kind of did the writing and the content, the writing of the stories and the editing of the text. And Marianna brought a whole design team and pipeline that allowed us to work with a number of designers and a web developer who just did this amazing job for us. And so we can kind of introduce some ideas of where does the kelp fit within the whole world, the realm of the seaweeds, the greens, the reds, and the browns. How do we break all this information up into accessible bites? We have a life cycle diagram on almost every page. And then towards the end, we introduce really get deep into what is photosynthesis, what is upwelling, where do these nutrients come from that are so necessary for this incredible organism to grow so fast. I really wanted to include this whole idea of naming. So we have researched all of the names for bull kelp with amongst the various tribes up and down the bull kelp range. From Chanama is how it's called in the Pomo. The Taladini have a gefilte fish. I'm probably not saying it right, but you can actually listen to it here on the website. In Coos Bay, the Hainanese speakers refer to it as a kalakas, and we have more. So including as many indigenous stories about the bull kelp has been really important. I'm just going to take you to some of the other really important organisms. Urchin. Just you were talking about, you have your urchin, and I can't remember the Māori name for your urchin there, but we have the purple urchin and the red sea urchin here in California. And then when you go farther north, you get this green sea urchin. And again, these are native to the kelp forests. So how do we learn as much about them so that we can understand why the system would work well and why it might be thrown off balance? What is a detritivore? Well, when the kelp forests are healthy, there's enough detrital algal material that the urchins can just stay put and be pretty constantly fed by the detritus. It's when the kelp starts being reduced that that the urchin get up and start moving on the march and causing the urchin barrens. In California and in Oregon and other places, it's our urchin divers that have been out there on the front lines watching the loss of kelp. And so they've been really important in some of the ecology, the restoration projects going forward. Again, we have a reproduction, so we know what a broadcast spawner is and how that affects the story of the bull kelp forest. So let's go. We have, I'm going to actually just go to one other. We have understory kelp for us here in the West Coast. We chose Pterogophora, or walking kelp, or some people call it woody kelp. Again, making sure that we're comprehensive in telling the story of the kelp forest. Pterogophora is just such a fantastic organism. And we even include kelp rack. And we have 2 new pages we're just about to write up, and I've been writing and we're about to program, is one on shorebirds and seabirds and the other one on salmon. So that's to bring the incredible benefits that the kelp forest brings to the shore ecologies. I mean, this is just an unbelievable amount of organic material that gets processed by all those kelp flies, and then the shorebirds can really benefit from all of those nutrients. And we get to address the idea of carbon, and is kelp really a carbon sink? I mean, that's really a tricky question. And so we can say, give our two cents on that. But let's go to the regional stories, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions. So the regional stories take you across the entire bioregion of the bull kelp. We came up with this fun kind of kelp index, which we're trying to build as a game, as a little bit of a tabletop game. We're working on that right now. In what region are these characters playing out or not? So really, this is the gist of what prompted me to want to do this in the first place, is that bull kelp is a coastwide species with regional dramas. In California here, we are having really, really huge declines in our kelp forests, just like you're describing in New Zealand. But if we go up to Southeast Alaska, in fact, Southeast Alaska is Nereocystis nirvana. Bull kelp loves places where the ocean runs like rivers. Well, that's very different situation than what we have in California, where the bull kelp is really on the open coast in the most dynamic wave zone. But because the tides are so extreme and there's so much current, that's the system that's bringing so many of the nutrients to the bull kelp in Southeast Alaska. And that's where, in fact, bull kelp is doing quite well. And it's really kelp farming that is the restoration efforts. So we have a whole section on tides. So I'll go to maybe one other region, maybe Puget Sound. Puget Sound is really interesting. They're having a lot of issues with their bull kelp, but it's not because of urchin. It's really because of ocean temperature and runoff issues. So we are working on, this is the Salish Sea, and these are the San Juan Islands. And we are going to have, right here is Friday Harbor. And we are going to have an exhibit next year of a whole kelp forest in this museum up there with sounds. We're working with the Samish Indian Nation up there to come up with some historical stories about the kelp abundance there around the San Juan Islands. And we will be hosting a whole bunch of other events around the kelp restoration that's working. It's a collaboration with the Puget Sound Restoration Fund. How does kelp, the Squaxin Island tribe has had a deep relationship with this persistent bull kelp bed for thousands of years, and it is now really in decline. And there's some really interesting genomics that are being done that we get to address on the British Columbia page. But I want to point out this little section that we have on each of our regional pages, and that is sea otter and sunflower sea star. Are they here? These are the top predators in the kelp forest system that have traditionally kept the sea urchin in balance. And on the west coast of North America, sea otter really only are sporadically in the ecosystem. We have sea otter in Central California around Monterey Bay and the Monterey Peninsula, but there are no sea otter north of there, all the way through Northern California and Oregon. They return, there's a good sea otter population on the coast of Washington state, and then again in Alaska. And the other issue for us here in the west coast of North America is the sunflower sea star, the second predator, that redundant top predator in the system, was disappeared by this sea star wasting disease in 2014, 2015. And then you combine that with the warming ocean events. So what we've done is put this little section into each region so you can see that here in Puget Sound, there are no sea otter and there are very few sunflower sea stars. If we do go up to British Columbia, again, it's where bull kelp is as flowhound. There are, yes, there are sea otters in some parts of BC, and they are repopulating new areas. And there are sunflower sea stars. It depends where you are. So the Haida have a really wonderful story about the two-headed bull kelp. I really encourage you to read this. It's quite wonderful. And the story up around Haida Gwaii is interesting because the bull kelp up there has really the most genetic diversity of any of the bull kelp in that region. And the Guayhanas National Park Reserve is one kelp forest restoration project where the Haida Nation, in combination with Parks Canada, was pulling urchin out of the system in hopes of the return of the sea otter. So I'll finish up here with what we're going to be doing. We have a Get Involved page. This is going to actually be transformed into a very robust section on restoration. So this is actually in progress right now. In a month, we're going to be able to release a whole section on bull kelp restoration, and we have a page on restoration, a page on aquaculture, and also a page of case studies. So that's where the Global Kelp Alliance is just fantastic. I also want to mention that we have regional resources. So for each region, if we go to the Washington coast, the Makah Cultural Center, their tribal workout is featured there. There's so much tribal work that's being done in all of these areas, so much work. So this is where you can go to the local resources. And then I also want to point down here that we have we have translated this all into Spanish and French. And our Spanish translation, really, we took a lot of time with it. We worked with a wonderful translator who's a marine biologist down in Mexico, and he has really elevated the language so that it's high level Spanish. So we're very, very happy about that. And back to us. Please be in touch with us. I'll go to our contact page. We have been endorsed by the Oceans Decade, but I'll call it. I'll end here and I'll stop sharing if I can figure out how to stop sharing, so that we can have some conversation. Did that work?
Perfect. Absolutely beautiful, Josie. Thank you. So for the questions, you can either raise your hand and unmute your microphone or just pop it in the Q&A. And perhaps while people are thinking of questions, I'll ask one to start to all three of you, because you've done quite a bit of work communicating about kelp forests and their importance to the general public. And I'm wondering what your impressions have been of people's sort of baseline understanding of kelp forests and their importance, and how that's changed, or if you have any stories or anecdotes of how that's changed through your work and that maybe broader recognition that's resulted.
I'll pop in and say, I've just seen a tremendous change in the last 5 years. There's been, we had just this tremendous response to our Kelp Fest on the North Coast, for one. People want to learn. They're really, really eager. And then I've seen all sorts of things happen as I do a lot of these art workshops, the cyanotype workshops that are very joyful, and they bring all ages together and families together. And I've seen other people doing them all up and down the coast. So that's just wonderful to see. It's not, I can say, well, I'm not doing one, but go find these other people who are doing it. So I'm finding that kind of thing. And there was also a Kelp Fest, just so you know, these Kelp Fests are grabbing hold. There was a Kelp Fest in Kodiak, Alaska, and there was also a Kelp Fest in Ensenada, Mexico, all within a couple weeks this summer in August. So those were, I think, again, very, very well attended and positive.
Encouraging.
I would 100% agree. I think since we began the project, and I'm not saying that's attributable to us, but like the interest in the community, just curiosity around seaweed forests, and providing lots of opportunities for people to engage in lots of different ways. So yes, we do community snorkels and we do education programs, but there are people that don't want to get in the ocean, and so having all these other opportunities that people can engage with is super important. But yeah, they're hungry for it. The curiosity is out there, and we started playing with this idea of a Kelp Fest for Wellington, and lots of people are starting to come out of the woodwork. So it's really exciting timing. I think there's a lot of community, buy-in and interest in their kelp forests now.
Another thing that we're working on is to connect with our California state parks, because they have such a good system of docents and interpreters that are already connected to school systems, and they bring kids out to the coast. So making sure they're very excited to have a really robust kelp forest programming within the California State Park. So that's fun new thing coming up.
Oh.
Maya, did you want to add anything, or you're okay?
Yeah, I mean, just echo what Zoe said. There is a lot of interest, and I think there's always been a lot of interest here in conservation on the land, and that's always been quite mainstream. But as people are hearing about the stuff that we're doing, everyone's quite curious. So there's a lot of curiosity, a lot of people wanting to learn and just get involved. It's something new for a lot of people. So yeah, it's cool to see that interest growing.
Super encouraging. Starting to go a bit mainstream. Evan, would you want to unmute and throw your question to the group?
Yeah, hi. Good morning, everybody. I apologize that my laptop camera is not working at the moment. Being said, thank you to Zoe, Maya, Josie for presenting the info you three had, and Aaron for facilitating this. Rephrasing. If you had any suggestions or tips for scuba professionals to get involved in the world of kelp restoration, would you be able to just point in direction for that? Thank you.
It might be a good question for someone in your around your region.
Evan, where are you located?
Yeah.
Currently Cambodia, but relocating to Australia and then eventually back to America.
Aaron's your man.
So I'll throw it over to me then. Yeah. There's a couple of ways you can get involved. Depending where you end up in Australia, I think the best point of contact is your local restoration or conservation project. But then there's also quite a few citizen science monitoring programs. There's Reef Check in California. There's Reef Life Survey here in Australia. And each requires a little bit of training and fish identification, but I think something that most scuba divers can get through and really improve their fish identification skills, which can be a bit of fun. And with that, you get involved in monitoring kelp ecosystems and seeing what those changes are, where we might need restoration, if restoration is working, and really just going from there and just being part of the community and the group and spruiking and sharing the love, I think never hurts.
Yeah, Reef Check just keeps expanding where they're working. So when you get back, even I think they're also in Hawaii, but they're just doing something down in Mexico right now. I just saw some monitoring down there. They're just an amazing organization. So Evan, yeah, find them. Reef Check California or Reef Check globally, I think.
Yeah, Reef Life Survey does go absolutely around the world as well. You can even start your own one if there's not a chapter where you are, if you're trained up for it. We have another advice question from Hannah. Hannah would like to know what you recommend is the most impactful thing the common citizen can do to help the kelp and the oceans. Big question.
Okay, shall I start? We do get this question a bit, right? And I actually think one of the most impactful things is actually to get to know and love your seaweed forest and to share that with other people, because people only care about and take action for things that they love and that they care about. And the only way that happens is if they've got some seaweed nerdy friend who's really passionate about it and gets them excited about it as well. So I do actually think that, it's really heartening to hear about this collective movement of people who are really interested and that our communities are more and more interested. So finding ways to connect with that and expand that community, and then actually lending your voice to some of those that wider advocacy work that is needed for our ocean ecosystems in general. So those would be, the two sort of starters that I reckon are achievable now, and build the right momentum for what we want for our oceans into the future as well.
Great, thank you.
Aaron,
I'll
I'm
also
curious,
just add,
yeah, what you say.
being thrown under the bus before I get thrown under the bus. So we have the Kelp Forest Challenge, which is designed to try to find ways for people to participate in kelp conservation or raising awareness or raising connection to kelp forests. So again, going back to wherever you might be located locally and finding those ongoing restoration projects or conservation projects or awareness projects and seeing potentially if you have sort of a skill set that could fit in. So we've had artists participate, we've had web designers participate, technology companies, advertisers, depending wherever your skill in life or interest in life lie, there's probably a connection you can find to helping kelp conservation or helping the kelp, I think.
And I'll just throw in the overriding framework, which is that these kelp need cold ocean. They all need cold ocean. So we just have to keep that in mind with all our, just all of our day-to-day living of keeping emissions down. And, people forget as the earth warms that the oceans are warming at rapid rates. So making sure that message for everyone who loves the kelp forest, that they really are dependent on those cold, nutrient-rich waters.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Aaron and Josie. How about you, Maya? Do you have any recommendations?
I would, just similar to Josie, just that kind of awareness around the kelp, but also that there are so many facets to its decline. So there are just the ocean's ecosystem in general, in a lot of places is imbalanced in a lot of different ways. So I guess just that awareness and the education around the different facets, depending on where you are in the world. And then, just getting involved in projects that are happening locally. Everyone's super welcoming. It's lots of fun.
Totally. I will plug, we have a map on the Kelp Forest Alliance website that has the different restoration projects and organizations displayed, so you can just hop on there and find where you are and see what's happening in your area.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any last questions for our presenters today before we let everybody finish off or get started with the rest of their day? Going once, twice. All right, then everybody join me in thanking Zoe, Josie, and Maya again for a really lovely set of presentations to start off our seminar series, and hopefully we'll see you back at the next one as we continue to explore the world of kelp and conservation and science and arts and community and all these wonderful things that are connected to these underwater forests. So thank you for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you all soon.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.